no water for the congregation, and they assembled together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and said, would that we had died when our brethren died in the plague before the Lord. And why have you brought up the congregation of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, and we and our livestock? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us into this evil place? It is no place of grain, or of figs, or of vines, or of pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tent of meeting, and fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord said to Moses, take the rod and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to give forth its water. And you shall bring forth to them water out of the rock. So you shall give the congregation and their livestock drink. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, and he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation before the rock, and Moses said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly. And the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in, rely on, cling to me, to sanctify me in the eyes of Israelites, you therefore shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them.
How many of us feel that we have the tools and resources we need in order to do the work that God has called us to do? The other day, I want to say the other day, I always tease about this because it means it was probably months ago, but it was in August, I believe, and Chris and I had purchased a pop-up camper. One of the greatest things we've purchased so far as a family. But I knew when I bought it that there were some things that needed to be fixed. Now, if you know me at all, I'm not a Mr. Fix-It. I barely know how to use a screwdriver and to use it properly. But I do know a little bit about how to connect certain wires together to make things work. And as long as there's no power going to it, I know that I'm safe. Well, the pop-up's taillights had eroded because they had been sitting for a while, and I wanted to replace them with new LED lights. When I went in to screw the old one off on the right side and I cut the wires, there was somehow tension on those wires and they fell into the frame of the pop-up camper. Now, they didn't just fall where I could hopefully reach them. No, they fell into the frame of the camper itself where I had no idea where they went. And I knew that my kids were wanting to go camping in just a few hours and I would have to learn how to fix my taillights. Well, after struggling for over 2 hours in 102-degree heat, that is honest truth. I was sweating, frustrated, upset. My kids were asking when we're going to leave for vacation, and I about lost my faith. But here's the thing. I had no idea what tool was even needed in order to complete that job. Let alone, even if I had the tool, would I even know how to use it properly to find those wires and to get my taillights to work? Here's the thing that I want us to begin asking this morning. Are we aware of what tools we have access to, and do we know how to use them properly? You know, some of you think that you can just make a good burger for barbecuing with a gas grill. You are wrong. That is a good tool, but you're cooking the burger wrong. You have to use charcoal. Everyone knows that. Charcoal is the best way to make a burger, right? What about Facebook? Facebook is a great tool. It really is. But many of us use it improperly. Just the other day, I thought about changing how I believed in God and how I might vote because of how someone posted on Facebook. Now, of course, I'm being sarcastic. There would be no way someone's certain post would change how I believe and how I think. That often comes through one-on-one conversation. Now, there's great things that Facebook can be used for, like what we're doing this morning with sharing our message. A great opportunity to share the gospel message of Jesus and giving people the opportunity to hear the words that Jesus is wanting them to hear and letting the Holy Spirit do its work. Oftentimes we have the right tool, but we use it improperly. What about our words? Our words are powerful, powerful tools. But many times I'm seeing, especially in the world that we live in today, we're using this great gift, this great resource and tool that God has given us improperly. How many of us have found ourselves with the right tool but using it in the wrong way? Or how many of us find ourselves in a situation where we don't necessarily even know if we have the right tool in order to accomplish what we're needing to accomplish? That's why I'm wanting us to wrap this series up named Called Out this morning with understanding the tool that God has given us. Because we have been talking about God calling us out to our purpose, calling us out to get our attention, calling us out, just like He did with Moses, to lead Moses in the direction that he needed to go in order to set other people free. And we talked about the instance of running away from our past and our circumstances and our experiences when God is deliberately wanting to use our experiences and our past to get our attention, to let us know the direction He's wanting us to go in, because we have the ability, we have access to know how to help other people overcome the things that they're struggling with, because we ourselves have been there before. We also understand that God has given us tools and resources to use to help people overcome the world that they live in, but we are so surrounded by voices and narratives that we often lose sight. We often lose the ability to hear the voice of God because we are looking and allowing other people to have attention over God. And we talked about God doesn't shout. He doesn't break down doors. He puts us and wants us to be in a position where we are wanting to hear His voice. And we look to Him before any other voices in order for us to go in the direction that He's calling us to go. And I often talked about this too, and we talked about this last week, that many of us are unwilling to change even when God makes it known to us, because we know it's going to cause disruption in our life. And when we have this fear of disruption in our life, we often don't hear the voice of God, and we aren't often able to go in the direction that God is wanting us to go. And this morning, I want to look at Moses real quick, if we can, of how he used the gifts and the tools that God gave him, but he used them improperly. And that's the verse that Johnny was just reading to us in Numbers chapter 20. But before we get to Numbers chapter 20, I want you and I to be remembering, or maybe hearing for the first time, of Exodus chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17, God directed Moses to use his staff to strike the rock so that water would come out. You see, in the past, God has given Moses the tool and the resource to do what God wanted him to do. But in this instance, something else is occurring. And I want to read again in Numbers chapter 20 of what God is asking Moses to do directly, and Moses is disobedient. He says, "You and Aaron must take the staff and assemble the entire community. And as the people watch, speak to the rock over there, and it will pour out its water." Now, I want you to go back just for a second, if I can. He says, as the people watch. Remember that for the rest of our message today. As the people watch. He says, speak to the rock. This time he doesn't say strike it. He says, speak to the rock. And it will provide enough water from the rock to satisfy the whole community and their livestock. So Moses did as he was told. But he took the staff from the place where it was kept before the Lord, that he and Aaron summoned the people to come and gather at the rock. Listen, you rebels, he shouted, must we bring water from this rock? Then Moses raised his hand and he struck the rock twice with the staff. And water gushed out so the entire community and their livestock drank to their fill. But the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the promised land that I am giving them. I mean, how harsh is that? Well, why would that be? Why would God say, you are not allowed to go into the promised land that I told the people that they could go into? Well, here's the thing that I want you to know and understand before we go any further. First and foremost, God gathered people around Moses and Aaron. He says, as the people watched, and he says, I don't want you to strike it this time. I want you to speak to the rock. Now, what's the difference between striking the rock and speaking to the rock? Well, here's what I started to really realize as I began to pray over this message and over this passage that God gave me. First and foremost, God is wanting to know if Moses will listen and be obedient no matter what. Here's the thing that Moses knew. He knew that he could strike that rock and water would come out. Why? Because he's done it before. But here's the thing. Oftentimes, God gives us what we need to overcome the issues that we're facing, but are we willing to listen to how He wants us to do it? Because I believe now more than ever that we have a group of people called the church, not just New Albany First Church of God. I'm talking about the people who call themselves followers of Jesus, or we label them or call them Christians, where we have seen the hand and the power of God before. But we have seen Him do things that we know have worked. But we are no longer, listen, we are no longer keeping our eyes focused on God. That when we see a problem or an issue, we tend to go back to the things that we used, or how we used to do them. When God is wanting us to do a new thing. You see, what faith did it take for Moses to strike the rock? I would say little or any at all. Because he's already had that work before. You see, God was wanting to know if will Moses do as I instruct him? Because I know, if you read the rest of the Bible, of the story, Joshua becomes the new leader. And Joshua listens and relies and is fully dependent on God. No matter where he goes. You see, many of us are so comfortable with the old blessings of God that we're not willing to listen and look for the new ones. And I want us to begin as a church, as a body of believers, as followers of Jesus, that no matter where we go, we're willing to hear and listen to the voice of God. I want us to be fully dependent on Him, even though we've seen God work and use a tool that we've been given. But sometimes God is saying, I want you to speak. I want you to speak truth. I want you to speak life. And I want to know, will you keep your eyes on me no matter what? Moses, in his frustration with the people, chose to do what was familiar to him that required little faith. And God says, because you have decided to go your own way, your own direction, you are no longer allowed into the promised land. Because I was not able to demonstrate my holiness to those who were watching. I want to change gears just for a second, if I may. I want to talk to those who don't even realize what resource God has given you in order for you to overcome the life, the frustration, the conflict, the turmoil, the chaos that you're experiencing. I want you to see the story of a man who had absolutely nothing except for one thing. And that one thing changed his life forever. And we find this story in Luke. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. There's a blind man hearing something. He hears a stir. He hears a crowd walking by. And he asks what was happening. And the crowd told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. And I love what this man does. He calls out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. But those who led the way rebuked him, basically told him to be quiet, shut up, get out of here. But guess what the man did? He shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped, and he ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. And when the people who were watching saw it, and what did they do? They gave praise to God. What I love about this story, and what many of you need to hear this morning, is this. This man had nothing. He understood, unlike Moses, unlike many of us, that what he had in his possession to help him overcome his blindness was his own voice and his faith. You see, this man understood that no way in any circumstances was he going to be healed unless Jesus did something about it. Jesus had to get involved in order for this man to receive his sight. And he knew that the only thing that he had in order to overcome the circumstances that he was facing was his own faith. And guess what happened when this man decided to put his faith into practice? Other people told him to be quiet. They rebuked him. They told him to shut up. I want you and I to know that if you and I begin to live in faith and we begin to realize that the only thing that we have in this world that can help us overcome our circumstances is our faith, and we put that faith to practice, people will try to shut you up. And this has nothing to do with politics. This has nothing to do with persecution. This has everything to do with your day-to-day life where you find yourselves struggling in your circumstances. You are struggling to overcome worry. You're struggling to overcome depression, anxiety. You're struggling to overcome this marriage that you feel will never be redeemed, that will never be put back together. And here's what we begin to do. We grab the staff that we've used before and we strike the rock twice to see if water will come out, when God has deliberately been trying to get your attention to tell you one thing. Speak out in the name of Jesus, and you will begin to see the healing and the things that you need to overcome the situation that you're facing. Stop trying to do this life on your own. Stop trying to live this life with your own resources and your own tools because you're using them wrong. God is wanting you and I to understand, just like this man who's on the side of the road, that we must be in full surrender of our lives in order to see God move in the situations that we find ourselves in, because I've seen this more than once in my life, and I've seen this even in my own life. I begin to use the things that I'm comfortable with that requires little to no faith in order to overcome the situation that I'm facing, and the only thing that I receive is rebuke rebuke that I deserve from our Heavenly Father, who tells me that I'm worrying and letting fear and doubt and uncertainty to creep into my life when I can be set free from my own blindness if I would only ask. See, many of us are situations where we're finding ourselves in trials and tribulations and fear and doubt and worry and consumption of all kinds of things, of pills, of drink, of food, in order for us to overcome the hardships that we're facing. We're using the old things, the old blessings of God, when God has something new for us in order for us to go in the direction that He's calling us to go. And He's wanting to remind the church as the people watch. Moses, I told you to speak to the rock. And what did you do instead? You stole an opportunity for me to show my holiness to those who are watching. And because of this, you will not enter into the land and into the places that I've promised you. I believe this is something that we as a church must understand, that we will not see what God is wanting us to do unless we're willing to fully surrender our faith to Him. 1 Corinthians 10:4 says this, that the rock that Moses struck was the exact representation of Jesus. Jesus was the rock. Moses striking the rock was a symbolism of Jesus being nailed to the cross. Because of Moses' disobedience, Jesus had to suffer. But here's the thing that God instructed you and I to do, and to learn from the message of Moses, that we are to speak to the rock. Speak to Jesus. And once we get Jesus' attention, and He calls us over, and He asks us and He says to those, and He says, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you want from me? You know what I love about this? Jesus already knows what the man wants, but He wants the man to speak, call it out of what he needs to overcome the situation that he's finding himself in. So I want us to ask the same question. Right now where you are, if you were to live by faith, completely surrender your life over to Him, where you understand, and what I love about this is that the blind man was a beggar. He had nothing. He had no seminary training. I'm sure he didn't do any Bible studies. I'm sure there wasn't a pastor who had discipled him or someone in his church who had told him how to have faith. But yet he had the power to see sight come into his life simply because he asked Jesus. And I want you to know this. If this is anything you get out of my whole message this morning, it's this. Everyone and anybody has access to that same power by simply having faith. So you get Jesus' attention, and He comes over to you. And I want you to know this is what He's saying to us right now, as individuals, as families, as a church. What is it that you want from me? You've got my attention. What is it that you want from me? What would be your answer? Because here's the thing. Some of you understand that you have to have Jesus in certain parts and areas of your life in order for you to see something, some sort of life in it. I'm going to ask, the situation right now with your relationships, do you believe that you are at the end of your rope? That you have no ability at all to overcome the situation that you're facing? I have to ask, have you invited Jesus into the situation? And I mean fully surrender and say, Jesus, if you don't get involved in this situation, then I know it's a complete loss. And don't you forget for a minute the power and authority that Jesus has in any situation, no matter where you think or how bad you believe it is. Many of us need Jesus when he comes to us and he says, what is it that you want from me? And the first thing that comes to your mind is a child or a grandchild. That you see them living the life that you never thought they would live. Never want or wish for them. And they continue to go the direction that they want to go. And you have put every resource and tool at your disposal. You've tried money. You've tried love. You've tried tough love. And you've tried every tool and resources that you have at your ability. But yet God is asking you, calling you out to say, involve me only. And here's what I love about this is when we call on Jesus and we have his attention and he has our attention and he says, what is it that you want from me? What is it? What is it? What's the one thing that you would ask him in that situation? To free them from an addiction? Free them from a sin? What is it? Let him know. Because he already knows the situation. He already knows the answer. He's wanting to know if you have the faith to completely surrender all that you know to only call on his name. What about worry about tomorrow? Have you ever tried to hit tomorrow with a stick? How would that work for you? But do you know who holds the future? Who knows what tomorrow will bring or if it will even come? What if we were able to involve Jesus in on our worries about tomorrow? And some of you I know are facing hardships right now. You've faced a loss. You've been told no. And many of you are saying, well, I'm just going to rebuild and go back and get the resources, the nails, the tools, the chainsaw, whatever, and I'm going to go back and hit that situation hard. And Jesus is saying this, listen, if you involve me, maybe I'll let you in on why I said no. That's a thought, isn't it? That's called faith. That God would reveal to you why he would say no. I just want to close with this powerful message that God gave me as we close this message, because I want you to really understand of what I'm trying to convey this morning. Because usually I don't use 2 or 3 different scriptures or stories, but God really wanted me to make sure we are all on the same page before we move on from this series. And I love what happens here when Jesus' best friend Lazarus died. And Jesus, it says, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb of Lazarus. And it was a cave with a stone, a rock, laid across the entrance. Went too far. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor coming from there. It's been 4 days. There's always a naysayer. It's okay. But I love what Jesus' response was. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Listen. If you believe, this is my message all into one right here. If you believe, you will see the glory of God. You see, Moses didn't believe, but the blind beggar did. And they both had access to the same tool, faith. It says, did I not tell you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took the stone away. Then Jesus looked up and he said to his father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you will always hear me. But I say this for the benefit of the people watching, standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, and his hands and his feet were wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Another man set free because of faith. As the people watched, Moses had access to everything he needed, a staff that God had called him to use before, and God told him to use his voice. The beggar had nothing in his possession, absolutely nothing except for his faith. Jesus himself was told, "Don't remove that rock. It'll smell." But yet he says, "If you believe, you will see the glory of God." What God said to Moses is, "Because you didn't believe me, I was not able to demonstrate my holiness to the people." Some of you need to know right now that the thing that you need to overcome the situation that you're facing right now is faith. And some of us need to be reminded that the old blessings that God has given us, He's calling us to a new thing. Why? Because it means we're fully dependent and reliant only on Him. And in every situation where someone believed and had faith, people were set free. I want us to understand that the voices will try to tell you to shut up. The voices will try to steer you away, to take your focus off of God. The experiences of your past, the enemy will try to remind you, to tell you, you don't have what it takes. You can't overcome. You can't do this. You can't be, as a church, reach those many people. You know who those people are? You know what they've done? They rebuke you. As soon as you begin to say, "I'm going to surrender, I'm going to give up my life for this purpose, for this cause," to see people come back to life. And some of you are afraid and you're fearful and full of worry and you're mad and you're angry because God's told you no, or you believe that the situation that you're in, nothing could ever heal it, nothing can ever overcome it. But God says, because of your lack of trust in me, because of your lack of faith in me, you will not see or be able to notice the demonstration of my holiness. You will not see the glory of God in your life. It's to those who have nothing to lose because they have nothing in the first place, who believe that the only thing they can do, the only thing that they have is their faith. And I trust and I believe that the promises of God, that those of us who come to that realization, to surrender our life, to surrender our past, to surrender God's old blessings at His feet, to keep our eyes solely on Him, then we will see the dead come back to life. Whether it's your marriage, whether it's your relationship with a family member, whether it's your child and their addictions, whether it's you and your fear and doubt that keeps overwhelming you, trust and know and believe that God can make it come alive once again. Don't ever believe for once that God can't redeem a marriage. He can't redeem a life. He can't redeem a child. He can't redeem a situation. We are to believe and trust in God, and the only tool that we need is faith. And our faith alone will see a nation healed. We'll see a marriage come back together. We'll see something we believe that is lost be found again. And I believe, church, if we're willing to move forward, if we're willing to keep our eyes on Jesus, then we will see the glory of God like we've never seen before. And I believe that God will bring sight to the blind. And I believe He will bring what we believe is dead back to life. And I ask, all that I ask is for you to get the attention of Jesus. And as He approaches you, because of your faith, and asks, "What is it that you want from me?" will you know what that is? And speak it. Call it out. Lord Jesus, you are the author of salvation. You are the rock that we stand on. And we want to call out to you. And we want to ask that you would overcome cancer. We ask that you would overcome the addiction that's ravishing our lives and our families. And we ask and we speak to the rock that you would redeem our lives and our marriages and our homes. And would you make yourself known? May the glory of God and the demonstration of His holiness be seen because of the faith of a few. And we ask this in your precious, loving Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Hey, before you go, as your pastor, write down, share with your spouse, what is it that God, if He were to ask you, what do you want from me, what would your answer be? And speak it out in faith that you will see it be done. What an incredible promise God has given us. And I also hope that you would join us next week because we're going to be doing our 5th Sunday. And we'll be doing a service project for our 2 local nonprofits to create bags for those who are living on the streets. And it's going to be a great time of devotion and of prayer, but also to serve our community. And those of you who can't be a part of that, we will have a message online for you. So don't think that we're not going to have something for you at home. We're going to have a worship and a message for you next Sunday at 10:30. But then in February, we're going to be doing a new series that I'm really excited about called Made Known, where we are wanting to know what Jesus meant when He declared there's no such thing as Jew or Gentile, slave or free. And I love the message that Jesus made known to the whole world, that everyone has access to believing and having faith in Jesus Christ. But it starts with the church.